Will advance to the line. Height, 2. Right. Bend it. Loose.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this Anzac Day Dawn Service of 2025. I am Captain Dion Becker, and I have the privilege of being your Director of Ceremonies this morning. Shortly, the mounting of the guard on the cenotaph will take place. The guard is to provide protection for the cenotaph throughout the commemorations. This year, we have one sailor from HMNZS Toro, from 2nd 4th Battalion, Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment. They are commanded by Lance Corporal Joshua Wallace, 2-4 Battalion RNZIR. The service will officially begin at 06:30 with the firing of a 25-pound gun, symbolising the time when ANZAC forces landed at Gallipoli over a century ago. Live stream internet and radio broadcasting will also commence at 6:30. In a few minutes, the New Zealand, Australian and United Kingdom national flags will be broken. Please note that there will be a 2-round gun salute at 6:30. These rounds are quite loud, so those in the vicinity of the gun are advised to cover their ears. I'll provide a warning shortly before the salute is fired. Also, later in the ceremony, the official parties will lay wreaths on the cenotaph. A wreath marshal will act as a guide. Members of the public will be asked to wait until the end of the service to pay their respects and lay wreaths. In the unlikely event of an emergency, please follow my instructions and directions from the officials. If you require medical assistance, please see the medical staff at the Red Cross tent across from Dowling Street on State Highway 1 northbound. While we wait for the flags to be broken, Murray Tannock, Pipe Major of the City of Dunedin Pipe Band, will play a lament. There will now be a drum roll signifying the rallying of the spirits. This will be followed by the gun salute, 2 shots, 1 minute apart. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to this ANZAC Day Dawn Service, the 110th anniversary of the ANZAC Forces landing at Gallipoli in 1915. I'd like to formally welcome members of the official party, our guest speaker and United Kingdom representative, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Dines, Royal Logistics Corps, Defence Advisor, British High Commission, the New Zealand Government representative, the Honourable Mark Patterson, the New Zealand Defence Force representative, Land Component Commander, Brigadier Jason Dyberg, DSD, the Australian representative, Petty Officer John Constable, the Labour MP, the Honourable Rachel Brooking, the Otago Regional Council representative, Crier Gretchen Robertson, and the Mayor of Dunedin, His Worship Jules Radish. I'd now like to introduce today's officiating chaplain, Chaplain Leah Chrisman.
Kia ora and welcome. We are gathered together today as community to memorialize and honor the lives of those who have served and continue to serve our country. We can physically gather at or attend a memorial or memorial service, but to memorialize is a moment that requires action. To memorialize calls us to remember and invites us to think actively about the present and the future in light of the past. I invite you today to remember and to consider the present and our hopes for the future. We remember and honor the sacrifices of thousands upon thousands of New Zealanders during times of war as well as peace. Through Gallipoli and many more conflicts over history, our people have known the trauma and tragedy of war and its aftermath. When society tells us to stifle or forget, it is important that we rather consider the gravity of these sacrifices lest we forget. We honor these knowing truly that greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. As we consider the meaning and gravity of sacrifice, our hearts ought to be touched and stirred for those affected by conflict today. Today we not only share in feeling the gravity of the past, but our hearts share in feeling the weight of such conflicts as the ongoing devastation in Ukraine and Gaza, and so many other lesser-known conflicts throughout the world. We consider the New Zealanders who continue to serve with the ANZAC spirit, and while we may never fully grasp the extent of their commitment, we look to them as an example and model of that ANZAC spirit to challenge and spur us. As we invocate the phrase, lest we forget, we are exhorted not just to attend a memorial, not just to participate in tradition, but to take inward account and responsibility that should result in outward action evidenced by our own words and behaviors. To memorialize is to remember the past with the purpose of affecting our actions today. We look towards a future where we are strong in the ANZAC spirit as well as bold in our hopes for peace and justice. The opportunity to which we are invited in memorializing is a choice to live in a way that is not indifferent, but that is informed and strengthened by our past. Today, let us take that opportunity to choose for the sake of our families and communities, our nation, and all mankind, to live lives inspired and altered by the examples of service and sacrifice from our past. And let us find unity in this purpose. As we say the ode together and fall silent for the last post and reveille, let us remember those who made the supreme sacrifice those from our own families, those with no one to remember them. Let us reflect on the present, and in so doing, renew our commitment to the causes of peace and justice throughout the world. We will now join in singing God Save the King.
This morning's readings are by Amy Hitchcox and Mackenzie Dennison, head students from Kaikoura Valley College.
Ka mahamara tonu tātou kia rātou. We will remember them. Before dawn on the 25th of April 1915, the first soldiers of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps landed on the shores of the Gallipoli Peninsula. What lay ahead of them was inconceivable. The battle raged for 8 months and forged a bond between Australia and New Zealand that remains to this day. The casualties from that battle alone were overwhelming. 2,800 New Zealanders and 8,700 Australians were killed, but at least 1,300,000 soldiers from both sides lost their lives at Gallipoli. Our very own soldiers, our very own Otago soldiers, paid a heavy price at Gallipoli, with 147 souls falling at the Battle of Chunuk Bair, a significant proportion of the 693 Otago personnel who died in the war. This was New Zealand's first engagement of the First World War, a day of confusion and sorrow, unimaginable horror. Anzac Day has been one of the most important dates on New Zealand's calendar since 1916. At first, it gave people a chance to honour the original Anzacs, the Australians and New Zealanders who fought on Gallipoli. Then it became a day for those who had served in the First World War. With New Zealand's armed forces deploying during the Second World War and wars, conflicts and the many peacekeeping operations that have followed, Anzac Day has become an occasion to honour all who have worn our country's uniform in service. Today, we reflect on that service. We recognise all the New Zealand's servicemen and women who have lost their lives in military operations carried out in our country's name. We honour those who have returned, changed by what they have experienced, and we honour those who are serving today in our Army, Navy and Air Force, and we thank them for their service. Across New Zealand, there are around 1,400,000 veterans, ranging in their ages from early 20s to over 100 years old. On today of all days, take the time to learn their stories, the stories of courage and sacrifice of our surviving World War II veterans and those who fought in Korea, Malaya and Vietnam, but also the stories of our younger veterans, those who have served in Afghanistan, Iraq, East Timor and all around the Pacific. All have done what was asked of them by their country and served us proudly. Today, we remember the fallen and we acknowledge those who still serve. We honour the values of the original Anzacs: loyalty, selflessness, courage, and the ways in which later generations have measured their own achievements against those of the soldiers who fought on Gallipoli. Ka mahumahara tonu tātou kia rātou. We will remember them.
Today we remember the deeds of Dunedin-born soldier, doctor and humanitarian, Brigadier Brian Mcmah. Brigadier Mcmah was born and educated in Dunedin. He attended Otago Boys High School and went on to graduate as a medical doctor from Otago University in 1955. In 1966, he enlisted into the Royal New Zealand Army Medical Corps. In 1968, he was posted to Malaya with the 1st Battalion of the Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment as a regimental medical officer. In 1969, he was posted to the New Zealand Medical Services Team Hospital in Bon Song, South Vietnam, that was established 2 years prior. The hospital's main purpose was to provide surgical and medical services to over 750,000 locals. The hospital's policy was that no one was denied treatment, including known Viet Cong. The hospital was later destroyed in fighting in the Bon Song area. In July 1998, Brigadier Mcmah returned for its reopening along with the former medical personnel who served there. It still operates today. He returned to Malaya in 1970 and then posted to the Royal Army Medical Corps in the United Kingdom for 2 years. He was the commander of the New Zealand Defence Force Hospital in Singapore from 1977 to 1979. From 1979 to 1983, he was appointed Director of New Zealand Defence Force Medical Services and served as Honorary Surgeon to Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth during that time. He retired from the New Zealand Army after 20 years of military service in 1983, but remained active in the New Zealand Defence Medical Services, serving 2 terms as Colonel Commandant of the Medical Corps. For his services, he was made Commander of the British Empire Military Division in 1983. He was made a Knight of St. John and a Knight of St. Lazarus, awarded for work in the Pacific Leprosy Foundation. A scholarship was named after him for his work for New Zealand Defence Force Health Service personnel. He became involved in the Monticello War Veterans Home and Hospital Trust new build, which was opened in 2006. He was the recipient of the ANZAC of the Year Award in 2011 and made a life member of the RSA. He embodied the ANZAC spirit of courage, compassion, commitment, and camaraderie as a soldier for his service to this nation. Brigadier Mcmah died in Dunedin on the 13th of March this year.
We now join in a moment of prayer. To the words, Lord, in your mercy, I invite you to respond, Lord, hear our prayer. Let us pray. For the peace of the world, for all who work to improve international relationships, that they may find the true way to reconcile people of different race, color, and creed. And for men and women the world over, that they may have justice and freedom and live in security and peace. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. For all who suffer as a result of war, for the injured and the disabled, for the mentally distressed, and for those whose faith in God and humankind has been weakened or destroyed, for the homeless and refugees, for those who are hungry, and for all who have lost their livelihood and security, for those who mourn their dead, those who have lost husband or wife, children or parents, and especially for those who feel they have no hope to sustain them in their grief. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Amen.
It is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Lieutenant Colonel Dines, Royal Logistics Corps, British High Commission. Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Dines joined the British Army in 1998 and commissioned into the Royal Logistics Corps. On promotion to Major, he deployed to Afghanistan as the logistics planner for Task Force Helmand, before spending a short time as the 2 Rifles Battle Group Logistics Officer. As a sub-unit commander, he returned to Afghanistan to train and advise the Afghan National Army. He is deployed on operations in Iraq and throughout Western Africa, also commanding 159 Regiment, Royal Logistics Corps. In October 2022, he was appointed the British Defence Advisor to New Zealand. He is married to Tony and has 2 young children. Sir, it is an honour to have you here this morning.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. It's a real privilege and a great honour for me to be here today as we gather to remember all those who have died in the service of their country and to honour returned and serving members of our armed forces. Today marks the 110th anniversary of the landing of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, the ANZACs, on the Gallipoli amphibious operation in modern warfare. The ANZAC Corps brought along the French and members of the 29th Indian Brigade. And on 25th of April 1915, the ANZACs landed under fire on the shores of Gallipoli. They faced immense odds, rough terrain, well-fortified Turkish forces, and the harsh reality of war. Of the 3,100 New Zealand soldiers that landed on that first day, over 650 became casualties. And over the course of the 8-month campaign, more than 130,000 servicemen from both sides lost their lives, including around 2,800 New Zealanders. These stark figures provide a small insight into the scale of heroism and human sacrifice that the ANZACs made. As a young officer, I remember visiting Gallipoli and was struck at how close the trenches were, no more than a width of a road apart, meaning a grenade could be thrown from one trench on one side into the other. Some of the most difficult conditions that you can ask soldiers to fight in. So today we remember those that fought bravely in the trenches, who endured unimaginable hardship and who paid the ultimate sacrifice. Soldiers who served in Gallipoli would later recall the horror of the battlefields and reflected on the ANZAC spirit that tied them to their fellow soldiers during the service in that war. This spirit lives on today within the New Zealand Defence Force and helps define their warrior culture. Since Gallipoli, New Zealanders have continued to serve in subsequent conflicts, and this year will mark the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, and I want to take this opportunity to pay tribute to those Second World War veterans who are still with us. It's also important to remember service in other campaigns such as Korea, Malaya, Vietnam, Bosnia, and more recent operations such as in Afghanistan and Iraq. Each campaign was different, meaning our veterans will have had very different experiences, ages, but we all wear the poppy as a symbol of both remembrance and hope for a peaceful future. A small gesture to show support to our armed forces. We remember and honour those who serve to defend our democratic freedoms and way of life, as service rarely comes without cost. Physical, mental, or emotional injury or trauma, the absence of time with loved ones, or other pressures that come from service. We also acknowledge innocent civilians that have lost their lives in conflict and acts of terrorism. We remember extraordinary people, not just those that are recognised for their gallantry, the extraordinary people whose selfless commitment saw them fight together and die together, those that gave their lives in the hope and belief that they would make a difference, whether or not the beneficiaries realise it. Yet as a serviceman, I'm also very grateful of the support you, the community, my friends and my family, as without their sacrifice and support, I would not be able to serve my country. So as you pause today, please also pay tribute to the sacrifices of the families that remain at home while their partners, sons and daughters serve their countries overseas. As a British officer, I can say that our two great nations have a shared history, a relationship cemented through the many conflicts where New Zealand soldiers have stood shoulder to shoulder with the British on the battlefield. A friendship that remains as strong as ever, one built on the experience of our ancestors. Perhaps inevitably today feels more relevant and poignant when wars are raging, with the devastating footage from Ukraine and the Middle East reinforcing the importance of preventing war and defending the values of our countries. Today, members of the New Zealand Defence Force continue to serve across the world and play their part in making the world a safer place. Whether that's training Ukrainian recruits in the United Kingdom so Ukraine can stand up to Russian aggression and defend their homeland, serving on United Nations peacekeeping operations across the globe, or at home here in New Zealand supporting local communities. Wherever they are serving their country, we owe them our gratitude, as they'll always be there for us in our hour of need, often serving out of sight against an unseen enemy, particularly when it's thousands of miles away. Time does not diminish the sacrifice or the skill and courage of those who have served their country, but it's learning from the past and the wisdom and experience of our ancestors that is important. They demonstrated the standards of courage, valour, discipline and moral behaviour to which we should all aspire. So while today is a day to remember and reflect on the wars and conflicts our countries have been involved in, it's also a day to consider the lessons from those sacrifices. In remembering Gallipoli, we not only honour the past, we reaffirm our commitment to a better future. So as we gather in remembrance on this solemn occasion, let us honour the sacrifices of our forefathers and remember all those who have served their country. Noria engamana engarangatira, tati kora hiuhu maina tena wā, tena koutou, tena tātou katoa.
The Ode for the Fallen in Te Reo by Emeritus Professor John Broughton, University of Otago, and then in English by Major Retired Robert Barlin, President of the Dunedin RSA.
E kore rātou, e koe mātua tia, pēnei i a tātou kua mahunei. E kore hoki rātou, e ngoi kore. Aha koa pēr e ngā āhuatanga o te wā, i te hekenga atu o te rā. Tai noa ki te aranga mai i te ata. Ka maumahara tonu tātou ki a rātou. Ka maumahara tonu tātou ki a rātou.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them.
It is now my pleasure to reintroduce the officiating chaplain, Chaplain Leah Chrisman.
When you go back home, say, "For your tomorrows we gave our today."
Ladies and gentlemen, wreaths will now be laid on the cenotaph to remember those who have died in the service of their country. Members of the public are invited to lay wreaths at the conclusion of the service. The first wreaths will be laid representing the New Zealand Government, Gallipoli descendants, the New Zealand Defence Force, the Australian Government representative, the United Kingdom Government representative, the City of Dunedin, and Dunedin Members of Parliament. Dunedin RSA, New Zealand Navy, New Zealand Army, New Zealand Air Force, and the Highlanders. Red Cross, St John, New Zealand Police, New Zealand Fire Service, New Zealand Customs, and Ministry for Primary Industries. New Zealand Corrections, the RSA Choir, J-Force, Merchant Navy, K-Force, and the Ex-Navalmen's Association. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd now like to call all organisations with wreaths placed in the remaining rows to come forward to place their wreaths. Following this, all other organisations, schools and the general public who are present with wreaths, they may lay theirs. The Dunedin RSA Choir will now sing the hymn, I Vow to Thee, My Country, written by Sir Cecil Spring Rice and arranged by Gustav Holst. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand by for the last post where the national flags of New Zealand, Australia and the United Kingdom will be lowered. A 30-second tribute will then take place, followed by reveille.
Start! Signal salute! Present! Up! Right! Away! Front! Shoulder up! Right, stand there, Wreath.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chaplain Leah Chrisman will now give the benediction.
God, we ask that you grant to the living grace, to the departed rest, to the Church, the King, the Commonwealth, and all humankind, peace and concord, and to all your servants, life everlasting. May the Lord bless and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join in singing the national anthems of New Zealand and Australia.
God, signal salute, present, up! Right, two!
Ladies and gentlemen, that almost completes the service, but before the parade is dismissed, on behalf of the Dunedin RSA, I would like to thank Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Dines for being our guest speaker today, Emeritus Professor John Broughton and Major Retired Robert Barlin for reading the Ode to the Fallen, Amy Hitchcox and Mackenzie Dennison for their readings, Murray Tannock for playing the Lament, the Dunedin RSA Choir, the Kaikoura Metropolitan Brass Band, the City of Dunedin Pipe Band, Gravity Events for sound and lighting, Bridie Strang, sign language interpreter, and the bugler Ralph Miller. Thanks also go to the Otago Gunners Association who conducted the gun salute, and the Otago Officers Club and Aotearoa Gaming Trust for funding assistance at this event. The RSA would also like to acknowledge the significant behind-the-scenes contribution made by the Dunedin City Council and their staff. And now a reminder of some of the other local Anzac Day services and events taking place today. At 8 a.m, everyone is welcome to attend a breakfast at Arai Te Uru Marae, Shetland Street, Maori Hill. A commemorative service at Anderson's Bay Cemetery commencing at 9:30 a.m. A service at Portobello Museum and Historical Society commencing at 9:30. A parade at the Mosgiel RSA commencing at 9:40, followed by a service at the Cenotaph Memorial Gardens at 10 a.m. A service at McAndrew Bay Hall commencing at 10. A parade march from Brighton Rugby Hall to the Brighton Hall commencing at 10 a.m, followed by a service at the hall at 10:15 a.m. A service at Green Island Memorial Gardens commencing at 11 a.m. A parade march at Outram from Mitchell's Foursquare to the Soldiers Memorial commencing at 11 a.m. A service at Monticello Veterans Home commencing at 11 a.m. A service at Green Park Cemetery commencing at 12:15. Upper Junction Otago Military History Group at 12:30. The Otago University Anzac Service at University Plaza adjacent to the Staff Club commencing at 1 p.m. Wet weather alternative will be inside the University Union Building. And the RSA Choir will perform their Anzac Review at St Paul's Cathedral commencing at 7 p.m. A final reminder that there will be hot drinks and Anzac biscuits available for members of the public at Toitu Otago Settlers Museum following the completion of this dawn service. Shortly, the Cenotaph Guard will dismount. On the completion of this, the parade will be dismissed.
Better punches in sense of start, hold, start, shoulder, arm, Guard will advance into line. Left, turn. Guard, to your duties. Full